A kid's book about voting. Better together. This book is best read together, grown-up and kid. A kid's book about voting. Voting is so important, and we often underestimate its power. Through voting, we decide what people and ideas mold and influence our day-to-day lives, which is why it's so crucial that we not only understand what voting is, but also its history. Young people are so imaginative, and there's no end to their potential. So when you teach kids about voting, they can discover solutions to the problems we face and imagine what voting can be when it's their turn to make the decisions. The younger people, the younger people are when they develop their civic habits, the more likely they are to become lifelong habitual voters. We hope this book will serve as a first step to that lifelong habit. Are there any words or ideas that you don't understand? Check the back of this book for a page of definitions. Hello. We are a group of young people who care about making positive changes in the world. One of the ways we do that is by helping other young people understand everything there is to know about voting, even kids. But we've already gotten ahead of ourselves. You probably want to know what voting is. Voting is how you show your support for a person or idea. You do this with something called a vote. A vote, simply put, is a choice for something or someone. Like, should we have pizza for dinner? Yes or no. What do you vote for? Things like ideas, laws, and even presidents. How do you vote? This depends on where you live. Sometimes you fill in bubbles on a piece of paper and then mail it in. Other times you vote in person on a computer. Who gets to vote? Well, that is a little more complicated. When our country, the United States of America, was founded, it was really messy. Okay, it was more than messy. Let us explain. Before the USA existed, many European countries used America for land, wealth, and power. This is called colonialism. But there are people who already lived in America, who today we call indigenous. Those indigenous people were forced out of their lands, and a majority of them were even killed. Europeans also brought people from Africa and forced them into slavery. Slavery is when someone is forced to work but isn't paid and no longer has their freedom. We told you it was more than messy. After a while, the people from Europe wanted even more power, so they created their own country, the United States of America. They made their own rules and decided who got to vote on them. To do this, in 1789, they wrote a document called the Constitution. The Constitution laid out the laws of the land that everyone had to follow. It also said who could vote. Can you guess who got the right to vote from the Constitution? White men who also owned land and paid taxes. This is only 6% of all the people in the country at the time. If you were a grown-up in 1789, would you have been allowed to vote? How about your best friend? Your teacher? Your parents? Does that seem right or fair to you? Many people in our country haven't been able to vote because of their race, age, gender, religion, wealth, language, citizenship, or physical ability. But who can vote has changed over time. In 1870, it wasn't until almost 100 years later, in 1870, after the Constitution was written, that Black men got the right to vote. 50 years after that, in 1920, white women were finally allowed to vote. Soon after, in 1924, a new law was made that gave indigenous people citizenship and the right to vote. But many states kept them from voting until 1957. Even after all of this, it still didn't mean that every Black man, white woman, and Indigenous person got the right to vote. A lot of them were still left out. Eventually, more groups of people got to vote, like in 1952, Asian people gained citizenship and the right to vote. In 1965, the Voting Rights Act said there couldn't be any barriers to anyone voting, in theory. In 1970, the age for voting changed from 21 to 18. In 1975, Latinx people gained the right to vote. Up till then, you couldn't vote if you couldn't read or write in English. In 1990, the Americans with Disabilities Act ensured that individuals with disabilities could vote. We want you to pause and think about all of this for a minute. Stop, breathe, reflect. Does it seem right to you that it took so long for so many people to get a chance to vote? We think it's outrageous, unfair, and simply not right. But we're hopeful because it shows that things can change. Still, not everyone can vote, but now more people than ever can. In the future, we hope that even more people will get the right to vote because believe it or not, some still don't. How? Through new laws, our government and people working together to make change happen. And how do new laws and governments get formed? Voting. Parks, schools, judges, senators, playgrounds, rule changes, governors, sheriffs, money, and on and on and on. Voting happens all the time, and each time is for something different. Almost every year, we vote for local things. Every 4 years, we vote for a president. Every 6 years, we vote for our United States senators. Voting is one of the most important things you can do. It's not just using your voice, but something even more special. Your power. Yes, you are powerful. When you vote, you use your power for what you believe in, whether it's an idea or person or movement. When you get to vote, it will be because many people fought to give you that right. When we vote, individual voices come together to make a bigger sound. Voting allows us to advocate for people and issues we believe in. It doesn't just happen with one vote, but with many, 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 which means your vote eventually, when you can, is so important. Because sometimes something wins by just one vote, or 7, or 3,000. So your vote matters. But sadly, not everyone who can vote does. For example, during big elections, like for president, only about half of the people actually vote. So what will you do when you grow up? Will you use your voice, stand up for what you believe in, vote, check all that apply? Outro. Now that you've finished this book, what's next? If you're a grown-up reading this with a kid, share your personal stories about voting. Any positive experiences? Have you ever faced any challenges to cast a ballot? What were they? Maybe you came across some terms as you were reading that your kid hadn't heard before, or a piece of history they never knew about. Take that curiosity as an opportunity. Kids are so smart. The solution to the world's problems are within their minds, waiting to be discovered. So encourage their ideas. Let them think and dream and ask questions and wonder how things could be better. Remind them that they have a voice, they have a right, and they have the power to decide on the future they want to see. Definitions. You may pause and look. The end.